Great. I'm short enough that I can't actually see the timer that's on the monitor, so I am going to look at Lee occasionally. Okay, good. Thank you. So let me start off by saying I'm new to Michigan, so it's really an honor and privilege to be able to participate in this discussion today. And I also want to clear up one thing that Jeremy said this morning when he alluded to my scowling about, his statement about we don't need any more audit with feedback, compared to control. That was actually before the study was funded. I didn't want to hear that message then. After the study was funded, it's fine for him to say that. That's not a problem. So I wanted, because I'm not local and I don't know the context so well, I don't have the kind of depth of experience here to be able to comment on things in the local environment. So instead I'm going to comment on sort of a summative level and respond a bit to some of what Jeremy talked about this morning. And I'll just say I've known Jeremy for almost 10 years and we have these discussions all the time. So this is sort of an ongoing discussion. I'm sorry he's not here to participate. So the first is, he started off the discussion, his talk, by highlighting the gaps issue. And he presented a couple of statistics. And having seen those statistics for a long time, not just from Jeremy, but from many people, I actually think we need to start questioning that gap statement. Not to say that there aren't plenty of gaps out there in practice that still need to be addressed and still need to be looked at, but those particular issues have to do with things like post-AMI patients prescribing beta blockers, statins, and ACE inhibitors. By and large, in the United States, in most of the healthcare systems that have attended to these things, this kind of stuff is being done very routinely. Those gaps no longer exist. And yet, we continue to have a lot of studies that focus on exactly those kinds of things. Single behavior around a fairly simple thing. It's not simple, I understand that, but compared to other things that we're dealing with, some of the things that Tony talked about, some of the things that Lou alluded to, much fairly simple, take a single decision, this is one thing that has to be done. I think that we need to start shifting focus and begin to look at much more complex sets of behavior, more complex sets of issues, which is very much along the lines of community, taking the work that we have and moving it outside of the traditional settings of primary care, hospital-based stuff, and starting to look at the much more complex interface and interaction kinds of areas. To do this, we actually still need theory. And so when Jeremy makes his statement about we may not need any more theory development, it often gets misinterpreted. First of all, I don't think what he's saying is that we need no more theory. He is saying we need no more one-off theories that get built out of a single study that essentially don't go any further and may never be looked at, read, or picked up by anybody ever again. We do need to use theory that we have, and I think Professor Yates in particular brought to bear some theoretical perspectives that are robust, that are well tested in over years of development. And those are theories that aren't used very much in implementation science. We have a real knowledge translation problem within the field. We're not moving certain kinds of things into the practice that we do because we are still very bounded by practice orientations and research paradigms that I think don't serve us very well going into the future. I'm not saying that all of the work that's been done to date should completely halt, and that no one should be doing studies of single intervention, single behavior anymore. But there should always be questions asked. Does this really need to be done? Is there, in fact, enough knowledge in this particular area that we don't need to do this anymore? And at this point, I have to say, as a journal editor, and as a person who sits on a lot of review panels and has done that for many years, I don't think we're asking those questions effectively. So I think it is time, as an academic community and as a community of researchers, to begin to start to move in the direction of stopping some behaviors and initiating some new ones. We need to apply our methods to ourselves to some extent. I also think we need to apply some methods from the world where Scott comes from to some extent, and where there's an emerging and pretty rancorous debate actually right now. And that's about what's being called by some people improvement science and being contrasted with implementation science. I think Jeremy would say that he thinks that is perhaps in the category of the sterile debates that are about semantics. Some of it is. I think that's true. But some of it is actually about fundamental ways of doing the work. And I am not arguing for decreasing rigor. In fact, I would argue for increasing rigor in most of what we do. But I would argue for a decrease in the sort of traditional research method of principal investigator-led, largely, despite the fact that much of it may be responsive to gaps in performance and gaps in real-world practice, largely still following a model that is driven by an individual and their area of interest and what it is that motivates them. I think we need to start moving into a world that's much more collaborative. So instead of thinking about the laboratory, thinking about the collaboratory and the kind of practice environment that Scott is working in, where you don't have a single PI who has the knowledge and the experience to drive an entire research program and a research agenda, but instead is able to work jointly with people across a whole variety of contexts and settings. The kinds of things that would be most useful at this point would be if people were working in parallel on different problems but using common measures, for example. Using the same instruments so that instead of waiting 20 years to do a meta-analysis, you start to do the meta-analysis as you do the analysis for each of those individual studies, and you do some of that analysis jointly across funded studies, across countries, and perhaps across contexts. I think that there are commonalities in contexts that we are going to get to. We may well get to some of those guiding principles. We're not going to do it by isolated studies that aren't joined to each other, that don't talk to each other, and don't do the work to some extent jointly. And that, unfortunately, flies in the face of the way that we have the reward systems structured currently in the academy. It's really hard for people to build careers if they work collaboratively. I can say that now. I'm a full professor. It's not going to hurt me to begin to do this work this way. It could, however, be very harmful to a junior person who might then spend some years of their lives sort of subordinating some of the things that they might bring to the table. And instead saying, I really will work collaboratively, but I might not get first authored publications out of this for 5 years or 6 years because of the nature of the work. In the academy, we have very little tolerance for that kind of thing. And I think that it's time for us, seriously, I mean, there have been discussions about this for many years, but we are not getting there. And I think that a university like Michigan, which has the advantage right now of being in a very good position in terms of rankings, in terms of its reputation and standings, could be one of the places that could perhaps spearhead innovative new approaches to how to do this, not so much for the academic careers, but for the science. Because I think the two are inextricably interlinked, and I think that we have to begin to move in this direction. So I'll just very quickly also say, the other debate that's out there continues to be a concern is in the realm of what the term I use is fundamentalism of science. And it's actually, I'm taking that from a piece on NPR that I heard many years ago, where a German doctor was asked, why is it that you use complementary and alternative practices in your allopathic practice? And his response was, well, because we're not fundamentalists like you are in the United States. That might have been a little bit broad, and I think, in fact, things are changing in the U.S. But I think that we need to not to use our thinking processes. I think Jeremy's point about the complexity of thinking and the fact that it takes a lot of energy to think applies again across the board to our work in academic settings as well as other places. It is easier to say there is a gold standard in research and that gold standard is X, whether that's the randomized controlled trial or whether it's a meta-analysis. It's easier to look at these highly distilled things like levels of evidence pyramids and to apply to those as though they represent truth. I think, in fact, in the world of implementation science, where we are still building what is a very nascent science, we run the risk of losing a huge amount of opportunity if we continue to be that rigid and that unthinking in our application of the knowledge base we have. I think we need to be expansive in our thinking, and we need to embrace the knowledge we have in its totality and begin to use systematic, rigorous approaches to analyzing and understanding it. I'll stop there.